what happens for people in the process of manifestation is that they're putting out a high vibrational thought, but that's not what they're seeing back yet, because what you're seeing is what needs to be cleaned up. You're getting a reflection of all those subconscious frequencies that are still out there. You might be asking for something that's really high, and for you to go up to that level and sustain it, it's too big a leap. So you're going to clear in levels and layers. It's not that manifestation doesn't work. You're not doing anything wrong. It's just that this is the stuff that needs to be addressed right here and now. So when we talk about frequency and the frequency of emotion, the frequency of thought, this is what we're talking about, and why it's so important, because it determines everything that you are capable of perceiving and receiving.
Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Today, I am very excited to announce our guest, Wendy Kennedy. Many of you have probably heard of her and know of her work. For over 30 years, Wendy has been a prominent channel and spiritual teacher, communicating with a wide array of higher dimensional beings, including the Pleiadian Collective. In this powerful episode, we delve into some of my favorite subjects: the nature of manifestation, clearing subconscious frequencies, and the absolute critical importance of operating from your heart center in these chaotic times. Wendy also shares her guide's perspectives on what truly drives reality, the potential for extraterrestrial contact, and why self-love is the most vital step anyone can take in reclaiming your personal power and sovereignty and shaping a better future. This podcast was incredible and surprising, even for me. Get ready for a profound shift in perspective. Enjoy. So again, thank you. I've been a fan for quite a while, Wendy, and I'm good friends with Rob Gauthier, and Ruben Langdon has been a friend of mine for many years now. So I've known about you and listened to your work for a long time. So I was like talking to Rob, like, Rob, you think maybe you could put in a good word with Wendy? And he's like, yeah, of course, but you're so busy, and then my schedule's crazy. So it's an honor to have you. I'm excited to talk to you.
Oh, thank you.
So, I thought an interesting and great place to start would be, I would love to know your perspective and what you've garnered from your sources, which are the Pleiadians for the most part, as I understand it, we live in an age of neuroscience, AI, and algorithmic everything, right? And so the idea of receiving information, from a higher intelligence it hits differently these days. People have all kinds of ideas about what that higher intelligence may or may not look like. And, I'm wondering how you are perceiving events that are coming, and what you think is actually going to be showing up, and if people are ready for it.
Oh gosh, that's that's a really broad one. So
Yeah.
I really think it depends on the individual and their frequency in terms of what they'll be experiencing, because I think the collective can be experiencing something that is a bit more chaotic. And if you're holding a higher resonance, then you're not getting caught up in all of the drama. You're just kind of staying above the surface of it all. And so life doesn't have to be so miserable and so painful and so challenging in a dramatic way. And that's not to say that, we won't have our challenges, but I think the more aware we become, the more we recognize when we're not in a higher frequency, and the faster we can make those shifts. It's easier. It's mastery. It's practice of moving back to those higher frequencies again and again and again. So, in terms of what the guides say, it's very difficult for them to predict, in part because of how we really create reality. We don't have a singular timeline. We just string now moments together to give us the perception of a timeline. And, they may be speaking with you here and now and giving you information as a group, and maybe half of that group will hold a particular resonance and another half might go on a different path, and they might in the future create a slightly different reality for themselves because of that. So they're my guides are very cautious about making predictions. The one that they have made, and I don't know how it will come about, but they do say that contact of some sort of disclosure may be coming next year. So We'll see how that unfolds, but it, it's just an opportunity for us to let go of more of our judgments, all those fears, all those worries, all those doubts, and really learn how to stay centered.
Yeah. Well, I love that answer. It amazes me how the human race is constantly seeking this omnipotence, this end all be all to the answer of their questions. But we've been, conditioned for the large part in a inverted way to look at this world, materialistically and external validation and, oh, AI is going to be the answer. Like, meanwhile, it's so clear to me, having been in this practice for, having had a spiritual practice for many, many years now, that the answers are right here. It's
Yep.
always coming back into center. And all the fears and all the paranoia and all the freaking mythology that is growing up around evil AI, is so unnecessary. And people underestimate their creative powers, and they don't realize it. Just keep on thinking like that, and we are going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy, you know. So I'm just your answer is so, I think, perfect and important for people to hear. So
Well,
thank you.
and I think we have been conditioned to think those things. It started early on, and we see it definitely in our entertainment. Whether you're talking about AI and robotics, or whether you're talking about aliens, it's always shown in a negative light, and all things are neutral until you assign value to it. So, we can use AI for our growth and expansion and support. And the other thing to remember is that that is a reflection of our internal technology, and we are seeking that outside of ourselves to figure out, what is this thing outside of me that's bigger than me. But we forget that we're a spark of the divine that already
Mm.
exists within us. So all those things that we're seeking outside, we already are. We just have to drop the illusion that says we're not.
Yeah, not worry about what Chat GPT has to say, but maybe close your
Yeah.
eyes and go
Right.
within for a few minutes and see what your heart has to say about it.
Right.
Um, so the Pleiades is, a real star cluster for people who are like, I've heard that before, but what is that? Not that there's probably a lot of those people tuning into this podcast, but it's a real star cluster in the constellation of Taurus, also known as the Seven Sisters, right? And
Yeah.
astronomers see it as one of the nearest stellar nurseries to us. But in spiritual traditions, it's often seen as a home or an origin for higher evolved beings who have a relationship with Earth. And I know you can speak to us about that connection in a way most people can't. And I would love to hear are they an ongoing civilization, which I believe they are, but are they non-physical? What's going on with them?
Well, it
With the
depends on which
Pleiadians?
dimension you're in. Yes. So the guides describe it as an open star cluster of about 750 stars. That's kind of where they set the boundary. Scientists sometimes say, oh, it's more than that, but that's the number that they have given me. And there are more than, seven stars that we can really see in the night sky. If you look up, there are probably 14 if you're in a darker area, but in a more urban area, you can see the seven. And they talk about it in terms of which dimension are you looking at, in terms of development and species. And it's a very vast system. There are lots of species there, the physical species that exist there. They say there are humanoids, there are the bird people, the lizard people, felines. So it's very diverse, and they have had a wide range of experiences in terms of their lessons. But there also are progenitors, so they have donated their genetic material to humans for our development. And so they're here to kind of help us to guide us so that we can remember our divine spark, and so that we can take stewardship of the planet. And, we've kind of abdicated that. We're not doing real well with that at the moment.
No.
But as we begin to love ourselves and love our fellow man, then we can very quickly alter what's happened on the planet in terms of pollution and some of the things that we've done, because Earth is a reflection of us as a collective. So, The group that I work with specifically, they're ninth dimensional. They don't have physical form, and they actually align with the blueprint of a star instead of incarnating to a planet.
Hmm.
So, we have our own blueprint here, things that we're working on in the Earth School, if you will. And so they have taken on the role of being keepers of frequency, keepers of records, which is what the central star in the Pleiades star system, Alcyone, does. So it's kind of a repository of knowledge. It would be like the Library of Congress in the United States here. So all of the records from the entire galaxy are stored there. Our sun is a library as well, and it's collecting and storing all of the information from the planets and all the life in our solar system. So they're here to help us to, like I said, to remember our divine spark. So they help us with records and understanding the nature of reality.
We need a lot of help in those categories. As you just said, I'm a firm believer in that the world is absolutely a reflection of our co-collective beliefs, or how confused we are, in other words, which is why you look out and see the chaos that you do. But I agree with you, when we start loving ourselves enough to free ourselves from from the complete abdication of our sovereignty that we've given away to these centralized, authoritative, you know, mostly totalitarian systems that are just in it to monopolize and control, and not like to govern people or care about anyone. We're going to be so much better off. My God. And you mentioned I saw Daryl Anka in San Diego. He was wearing a shirt that said everything will change in 2027, and then the E and the T, we were much
Oh,
bigger than the rest. So he's talking about, he's been talking about it for a while, but he's saying 2027, it's going to be like, when his words were, when the kids are playing in a way they shouldn't be, and then the parents show up and everyone's like, he's like, it's going to be a lot like that. And I was like, we can only hope he's right, because we could use that kind of a knock on the door like that.
yeah. Well, it radically shifts our perspective at that point. We start asking different questions. We
Yeah.
start asking better questions and start, we're not going to squabble amongst ourselves in the same way. So it can be a very unifying force. But, the guides say the beings who are of the highest light aren't showing up at your doorstep collectively yet, because we still are working on clearing out a lot of that fear that we have. So they've been waiting patiently for us to do that. On an individual level, they've been showing up more and more for people, but collectively, not quite yet. And I know a lot of people get really frustrated, like, when's it going to happen? And
Yeah.
it's like, it doesn't really matter whether it happens or it doesn't happen. It's all about you going in
Right.
and making that connection. And you have to look at, why do you want that? What is the
Mm.
driving force? What need do you think that's going to fulfill? And make sure that whatever need you think that's going to fulfill, that you're filling that for yourself. That's really important, because one of the biggest messages from my guides is that we don't abdicate our power. Higher isn't necessarily better, it's just different. It's a different perspective. And beings in higher realms don't necessarily have better answers than the ones that we have for ourselves. So that's going to be really important. And that's also part of why they've stood back and have been working in the way that they have, giving us time to learn to trust ourselves, and
Yeah.
what that intuition feels like, that moment where you're like, something feels off, or, oh, I feel really called to go this direction, so that we learn to recognize that subtle energy.
It's so profound what you just said. What is it you think that, you're looking for in their arrival, and are you cultivating that? Are you watering that seed in yourself? That's so profound, because a lot of people are I may say a lot of people, we'd be better off with a lot of people, but some people are very, very kind of focused on, like, well, when the F are they going to land, and I'm like, dude, first of all, if they landed right now, they'd get shot at. You know what I mean? Like, so there's a slight problem in the welcoming committee. I don't know what you're imagining, how this goes down, but depending on where they land, they'll be bombed, and it would be a disaster. So I was like, we need to be prepared, and then I think things will take their natural course, but everyone is looking for, some kind of savior or messiah, and I feel like there's such a pitfall in that,
Yeah.
we don't, and part of me is like, God, how did everyone end up so like? Was this part of the programming that the Anunnaki did with the intervention? And like, did they, obviously we know that they intended to make us good list, like follow the leader,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering if that play, like if the Pleiadians ever talk about, does that play into this, this I want to say S&M, it's the wrong word, but this slavery, dominating society that we have with the class structure, and I mean, slavery was a thing for thousands of years. It's thinly veiled now, but it's still present, Um, and I'm just wondering when we're going to snap out of it and what the guides say about that.
Well, we're kind of in that period where we're starting to see behind the curtain. We're we're seeing some things going on with our government and the human trafficking and some of just the seedy side that's it's coming out. It's coming out slowly because it's very difficult for people to handle.
Mm.
But when it's kind of dripped out, they can make those internal adjustments. Um, but Yes, the Anunnaki portion is a huge portion of it, but it goes beyond that. It goes into galactic programs. So Earth
Mm.
is a grand experiment where we've pulled genetic material from thousands of worlds to try to integrate a lot of the programs that sometimes weren't integrated in other star systems. And as we're doing that, um, there are lots of smaller representations of that same energy. So it's a much bigger thing that's going
Yeah.
on right now than just that, but we see it certainly in that relationship. And there's been that conditioning that's gone on. And if you're somebody who has a hard time thinking about it in terms of the extraterrestrial intervention that's been happening, just at a very human level, you can see how the manipulation has happened in our advertising and in everything that we're exposed to try to get us to react in a certain way, to
Fear,
get us
fear,
to
fear,
move
trauma,
forward.
trauma, trauma. Yeah.
Yeah. So, at a very human level, we can certainly begin to see it, and that also has to do with the internet and our exposure and the saturation and the way that we experience time. We can see the pattern now repeat so quickly that we actually see it, whereas before things took a little bit longer to get information and we didn't see the patterns as quickly. Now it's becoming really obvious, and it's a really tricky game that they play.
Yes, it is. It's a cat and mouse, predator prey.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
fascinating.
it is, but, the thing the guides say is they say it's a fait accompli. It's a done deal. It's
Yeah.
just a matter of how long is it going to take us to unravel everything. We will come out on the other side. We've reached the tipping point for that. So it's just
Yeah.
how are we going to play it out?
God, whenever I hear that, it reminds me that I've heard it before and not to forget it. Because it's easy to forget sometimes when
Yeah.
you're looking at it.
And as we were talking about before with people with ETs, why do you want them to show up? Because I want things to change. Well, what specifically do you want to change?
Mm.
And again, go and work on that within yourself. If you want to see something change in terms of the social structure, what can you offer to help be that change? If a lot of times it's validation,
Yeah.
people want to be proven right. Well, what is the need that's driving you to get that external validation? So it's working on your internal validation that will help you, and whether they show up or not, you really won't care. You'll know the truth within
Self-love.
yourself.
It's self-love.
Yeah.
I think the two most important words this species can learn right now is what that means, because from that I think stems all the peace that people are looking for, all the equality, everything. It's in those two words. But so from a physics standpoint, vibration and frequency, they describe a movement and a rate, right? But when you use these words and when we use these words in a spiritual context, you know, they mean something a little different. Like, how do these energetic concepts translate into kind of human experience involving emotion and healing and evolution.
Well, all of those things are frequencies, and they have a different rate at which they vibrate. And and depending on the frequencies that you're holding, as that energy goes out, the universe is going to reflect that energy back as your reality. So as we make these adjustments within ourselves, the thoughts, the frequency of the thought that we hold, the emotions that we emanate, the more conscious we are with that energy and directing that energy, one, it's more powerful. The signal goes out stronger and clearer, and it also manifests faster. So we might have all these subconscious beliefs that are quietly vibrating out, but when we take the time to think about what it is that we want to create, how would that feel? What thoughts would accompany that? When we do that, that goes out and it comes back. It overrides all that subconscious stuff. Eventually, what happens for people in the process of manifestation is that they're putting out a high vibrational thought, but that's not what they're seeing back yet,
Huh.
because what you're seeing is what needs to be cleaned up. You're getting a reflection of all those subconscious frequencies that are still out there. You might be asking for something that's really high, and for you to go up to that level and sustain it, it's too big a leap. So you're going to clear in levels and layers. It's not that manifestation doesn't work. You're not doing anything wrong. It's just that this is the stuff that needs to be addressed right here and now. So when we
Right.
talk about frequency and the frequency of emotion, the frequency of thought, this is what we're talking about and why it's so important, because it determines everything that you are capable of perceiving
Mhm.
and receiving.
Yes, it's enormous, it's one of my favorite subjects. People. It's amazing to me that there are some people, holdouts out there, who are like, "It's all BS. It's manifestation." I was like, "Wow," like you haven't correlated the fact that things that show up in your life, are related to your thoughts and feelings and actions. You haven't made that connection yet. There are still some holdouts, out there that it just blows my mind. But it's like a meditation. When you start meditating, it's a little more difficult. It gets it's a practice. It gets easier. And you drop in faster. But before, you have these intrusive thoughts that get in the way of you dropping in when you're meditating, and like some of them are terrible. Some of them are like they're just like these terrible echoes from like
Yeah.
they're like what ifs and what took place. Just you're like, geez, that's what's going on, and I just remind people, it's like that's your resistance, that's your subconscious, that's what you need to work through to drop in. And it's the meditation is a similar kind of, I'm sorry, manifestation is a similar framework. You got to clear out all those underlying programs and thoughts that are keeping you from whatever it is, your wealth, your health. You can try to fake it till you make it, but the universe can't be fooled. You have to fool yourself first, truly. um, and I'm that's where the whole spiritual bypassing and positivity, they run counter to productivity. You can fake it till you make it if you make it, but if you until you stop faking it, the universe is not going to align for you. You're not going to get what you're looking for.
Well, yeah, because you're not truly in alignment, because everything else that's underneath that. And those subconscious programs aren't a matching frequency with, what you keep putting out there. And I think that's why people think that the manifestation thing doesn't work. They're like, well, I keep asking for this thing, but it doesn't show up.
Bullshit. Like, oh, I wonder
Well,
why I'm not
because you
getting
haven't
it.
done the work. You
Yeah.
haven't dealt with whatever is showing up in your life. You've just kind of pushed it to the side. So that is something that's really important in the process here, is that you give yourself permission to, one, feel whatever is coming up. And that's the quickest way to allow that energy to continue on its journey. It was meant to be in motion. And
Yes.
it's not getting caught in the story of it. It's not replaying the incident, or it's not about figuring out how you're going to avoid it in the future. It's just being present with it and observing, where does this sit in my body? How does this feel? What emotion is it? What thoughts come with it? And it's observing it without judgment. And it's the without judgment piece that is so powerful, because when you judge something, you want to be separate from it. That thing you want to be separate from is part of source energy. The natural state that the universe wants to bring you back into is wholeness, to see that you are one with all that is. And until you see that, you're going to keep manifesting that thing you want to be separate from. It doesn't mean if it's something that's negative that you want to keep feeding your energy into it, or you that you want to, how shall I say this, to say, oh, it's a great thing, everybody should be doing this. It's just
Yeah.
to acknowledge that, yeah, that's a valid exploration of frequency, not a choice that I'd like to make or continue to make, but it is part of source creation. And when you can approach it from that neutral standpoint, that's when energy can flow again.
Yeah.
And as we do this, it allows us to process energy that may have been stuck for many, many years. It's if you've been stuffing down that same frequency, every experience of stuffing that same frequency gets unlocked, and it allows it to flow again when you give yourself permission just to observe it. And the guides say you can stay in pain for 30 seconds or 30 years. It's up to us.
Yeah.
So it's all about just acknowledging the frequency. And when we do that, that's when we really start to level up very quickly.
Yeah. And it's, reconditioning the mind and the body too, to allow that feeling, to allow that frequency, because many people, not just men, a lot of men, but the moment that feeling comes up in us for any number of reasons, it's whisked away, and that leaves us over time in a lot of trouble. And I think, like I have a dear friend who's getting into a very consistent meditation practice, and they're like, I cry in the middle of meditation. I was like, that's great, that's good. You know what I mean?
Yay!
Like that's don't stop because of that. That was the greatest thing, the gift that meditation gave me. It gave me my ability to be vulnerable back, help me recondition my body and allow all the grief, which I had, been cut off from because of trauma, to come up and out and express itself. And, weeping for, joy, for every reason, was the greatest ability that, this path gave me back that I had lost. And so I always encourage them. I'm like, keep going. That's fantastic. That,
That's
your
beautiful.
body's metabolizing all that emotion you've been just stuffing down and pretending isn't there and distracting yourself from. So I think it's so important for people to hear that and realize that, you can allow without, you don't need to jump into the hole and go swimming in it. But
Yeah.
if you pretend it's not there, it's gonna come out another way. You're gonna end up biting someone's head off or doing
Yeah.
something. You're like, why did I do that?
It'll
It always
create
comes out.
high drama until
Yes.
until you have to stop and deal with it, whether it's an illness or an accident. And when you're doing this practice of just observing, the longest most of us can hold on to that energy is about 45 seconds, because
Mm.
otherwise we're going into the story of the trauma, whatever happened, or we're going to the future to try to figure out how to avoid it. So if you just stay present with it, you can't really hold on to it for long. It's like mist, it kind of evaporates, it
Mm.
just kind of goes away. And you don't have to know where it came from. That's the other piece. People want to figure it out mentally. It could be something that you're carrying over from other lifetimes. It could be part of the ancestral programming, things that happened in utero,
That's
things that you
right.
forgot about in childhood. I mean, it's just allowing it to clear out. And it's one of the things that the guides say is that never pass an opportunity to cry, because
Mm.
they say it's a way of the body to have a physical release.
I am turning that beautiful statement into a clip that I hope goes very viral because I so believe that it's so important. It's like the creator gave us this emotional valve,
Yeah.
and it's a release valve. And what happens if you when you pipes get clogged, things get really messy really quick. And when we don't allow ourselves to cry, and obviously we're not saying just go and be like a mawkish mess everywhere. You know what I'm saying? But allowing the emotion and not caring about how you look and what people think about you is like, that is liberation. That is, and that's how we get our sovereignty back is realizing that is self-love. And it's such a important statement you just made. I love it.
Yeah, never pass up a good opportunity to cry.
Never pass. Thank you. Never pass up an opportunity to cry. There's, you'll end up sick and miserable in one way or the other. So I love that. So tell me, Wendy, as a person who has, I spent time training to channel. I don't, I was really intent on learning how to access this part of me, and first communicating with my higher self, and then having a channel that is open. I did it for many, many months with some people who I know you've heard of. I learned a lot from Rob, a few other people, Daniel Scranton and Tyler, a bunch of people who I know
Great
you know.
guys.
Yeah, and I don't know what I didn't want to. I didn't want to do what you do, but I wanted to be able to be connected in that way. And for a lot of people, there's a lot of they're not sure what's going on or what to make of it. Some of them like the information, but they're a little freaked out. You know what I mean? Like, how do you break it down simply for them? Like, what happens in your body, first physically and then maybe metaphysically, when you connect with the Pleiadians?
So the heart center is the gateway to accessing multidimensional information. So you have to be in the heart centered space. So I ground in heart center. That's the first thing. And then I set an intention. Who do I want to connect with? A lot of times it's just asking for the highest information from the highest source possible. And I actually do work with a lot of different guides from different
Yeah.
star systems. I tend to work with more galactics, and it just depends on the information that I need. And I have one guide who's for healing. Anytime that she shows up, I know what we're going to be talking about. It's not a
Mhm.
surprise. So it's setting that intention that's really important. And one thing that will actually help you, if that's what you want to do, is to have a question in mind, a
Mhm.
specific question, because the more specific you are, the easier it is for the guides to give you information. Because if you say, well, what do I need to know? And they're like, well, there's a lot you need to know. Where do we start? And then they have to look at least the higher guides will look at how that impacts you. And they don't want to take away an opportunity for you to grow by taking away your lesson. So when you are saying, I want this information, it makes it much easier for them to say, okay, well, you're ready, and I can give you all this information here. So when I channel, I go into that space, I set my intention, and I expand my energy. So in some ways, you can think about my frequency going up, theirs comes down, we kind of meet in the middle, and then I translate. So
Mm.
that's what's happening. But the process for me, when I experience it, it's a bit like a lucid dream. I'm present. Sometimes it feels a little strange, like my mouth is moving. I don't know what words are coming out, really. And I'm
Yeah, I
just kind of
remember.
listening. And then it will fade pretty quickly. So for me, when I channel for myself, I actually do automatic writing. So I have
Oh
something to
wow.
go back to. The energy is certainly higher. It feels expanded. The information that I channel, the words that come out, there's so much more that I know in that moment. I
Mm.
always describe it as like the words might be, it's a nice day, but I know there's so much more detail in there. The grass is green, the birds are chirping, there's a light breeze, you can feel the sun. I mean, there's just so much more information. And it's the same thing when you're receiving the information. There are packets of information that are received, not just the words that are communicated. So I feel that, I sense that. And, I always feel in greater alignment. When I used to do private sessions many years ago, there were times where I didn't feel great. I may have had a
Yeah.
cold or something. I might have felt a little off. And I would still go ahead and work, because when I would work, all those things would go away, and they would
Yeah.
stay gone for usually about a half hour to an hour after I finished the sentence, until I kind of came back to my daily set
Yeah.
point. But I always felt better. The coughing stopped, all the physical symptoms cleared up. So it there is an expansion that certainly
Yeah.
happens when I'm in that space.
And a raising, I think, of frequency. And I
Yeah.
think you know, you all. What I remember, I I used to be in a meditation group. We used to meet in person. This was before 2020. Times were amazing like that. You could you had people had meetups and meditation groups got together, and now things are a little changed, but they're going back a little bit to normal since 2020 and 2021 and the COVID debacle. But I was practicing channeling, and one of the people in my group was like, "Why don't you do it for us?" And I was like, "All right." And then they asked me to do it like every single time we met for like 6 weeks. I was like, "Okay, I'm not doing it. We're here to meditate." you know, but I remember the sensation, because again, it always starts with the heart, and it almost comes from it. Never What comes out of your mouth never really reaches your brain. You know what I mean? It comes out from here almost. It's not like you're not conscious of what you're saying until you say it, and then maybe you become a little conscious of it, depending on how much of a trance channel you are. But people, it's like, and it's so amazing to me. It's fascinating how it's tied to psychic abilities, and people who get really good at, some of the best psychics I know will tell you, like you can't let the information get here. It has to come out before it gets up into before your mind can mentalize it,
Yeah.
and put it into a context that it wasn't perceived in, which is how you can get in trouble.
Yeah, because we have two operating systems. So we've got kind of the operating system of the ego mind, which is what's allowing us to play in 3D. And then we have the multidimensional heart center, which is, our other operating system. So what we'll do is we'll get that expanded information and then we'll try to pick it apart in the brain. And
Mm.
so we'll drop out of that heart centered frequency. So, what we're trying to do is learn to sustain that heart centered space, but it's not always easy. When we get triggered or we don't understand things, we'll go back in the mind and kind of pull it apart. And I've been doing this for 30 years now, and if it's a new concept that they want to talk about and it's something that they haven't exposed me to, and I'm a very inquisitive person, I want to know about it, we'll talk about it first, because
Yeah.
sometimes my brain can get a little active and I say, well, how does that work, and how about this, and how about that? So they'll go through some of that information. They'll know that somebody's going to ask a question and it'll bring it up, or
Mm.
so they'll kind of give me a little debrief sometimes on that so that my brain doesn't get too active.
Yeah, yeah, and you have to, you get used to it, but people don't realize how courageous you have to be to be a channel, to be willing to sit in that seat and trust yourself enough to let information come through and not know what exactly what it's going to be, but trusting your guides and your connection and the work you've done. And it takes an incredible amount of bravery. I'm sure you're very used to it by now. You get up and you're in front of an audience, but I'm sure you remember when you first started doing it, that kind of like, oh my God, am I really about to do this in front of people right now?
Yeah, I always knew it would be there. That was
Yeah.
never a problem, but I wanted it to be accurate. My ego wanted it to be accurate. I didn't want to get it wrong.
Mm.
And I think over the years, I learned to let that go. I had somebody in a private session once. She came to me and she told me this was her second session. And she said, the first time I had a reading, I hung up the phone and I thought, that's not very good. And I'm on the other end going, well, why are you here?
Yeah.
And she said, I listened to it again, 3 months later, and then 6 months later, and then a year later. And then I finally realized a year later, I got all the information that I asked for. I just couldn't hear it at the time. And that was such a beautiful gift for me to recognize that it doesn't really matter, because they might not get it now. It
Yeah.
might be something that needs to unfold over time. So it's none of my business whether they get it or not. All I can do is keep working on myself and be as clear a channel as I can possibly be and ask for the highest information. And that is all I can ever do.
Yeah. And again, heart space being so important for people, I mean, just to be aware of that you have this incredible energy center here, and that it's always there waiting for you to become aware of it, and allow some of your consciousness to come from that place and just breathe in and out of that place, and see how it affects your day. It's just a
Yeah.
different you put yourself on a different timeline immediately just with that little technique. It's I wish it was much more practiced and taught.
Yeah, I mean, it's you can make a game of it and see how it changes things and what you can create by doing that. And the guides say the easiest thing to do is to think of something that makes you smile. That
Yeah.
will put you in that space. And most of us will feel expanded, uplifted. We might feel warm, tingly. That's one way to get us there. As you well know, meditation, and there are different ways of meditating to achieve different results for different purposes. But
Yeah.
to get you to the heart center, they say that's one of the fastest things that you can do. Meditation will help
Yeah.
you stay there.
Yes. And a trick that I learned as an actor for 20 years is, people are like, well, I think I could think of something and, I, but it doesn't really open my heart. I tell people, we're sensory beings and our memory lives in those senses. As an actor, you learn that if I just think of, a moment in my life, it's not gonna bring the emotion that maybe I need for this moment in the play. Now, if I think of the first time my newborn son wrapped his little hand around my pointer finger when he didn't even know I was there, then I feel his hand and my heart immediately begins to open, just from that memory, from that sensory memory. So that's a trick people can take with them if they're listening to this. Like sometimes it takes a memory that adds that sensory element to really kind of open the heart a little and feel that center as opposed to it remaining intellectual.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
can also think of baby animals. They're great because, in
Yeah.
part, the proportions of baby animals were encoded to want to take care of,
Yeah.
of that. So, looking at a baby animal, that's why we all look at something and we go, "Oh,"
Yeah.
because it does. It puts us back in that heart center space as well. Sometimes, if we think of a pet or a loved one, we might have some programs running. The dog might have gone on the carpet and you're not real happy with them. Or, there's some subconscious beliefs about your spouse or partner, some things they're doing that's irritating, or maybe you've got some fears or worries that you're not conscious of yet. And
Right.
if you're using that as an image, it might be very difficult. So a lot of times the guides will suggest baby animals. I actually have a folder on my phone of images if I
Wow.
need something. If I'm in a rough space, a really stressed space,
Mhm.
I know I've got tools and I can go into that folder and that can help me shift my energy pretty quickly.
That's incredible. I used to have the same kind of catalog as an actor, everything from music to videos to
Mhm.
pictures, everything I could try to draw on for it eventually shifted just into heart opening, but it was for all the emotions I had. As an actor, I would have that storage there to draw on. But it's amazing to hear you say that. It's so wise. And baby animals, you just can't go wrong. I always tell people if your algorithms are horrific, just start clicking on baby animals all day. And then that's what will show up for you in your feed. But
That's
my
great.
I have a question about. So when your guide show, I know there's a nuance involved in how you can recognize, one guide or uh, collective from the other, and I'm wondering, like, and I'm sure it's individual for each person, but like for you, is it purely energetic? Is it a color? Is it like, do you see something? How do you recognize who's coming through, and like what happens when it's new?
It's kind of hard to describe. I think there's a claircognizance that I
Mm.
experience, a knowing of that's who it is. The guides have talked about that in the past, and they said, think about it. They gave me this way of describing it. Think about if you live with your family and you hear somebody's footfalls as they come
Mm.
down the hall, you have a sense of who that is without being able to see them. So it's kind of the same thing when I feel that energy, I know who it is. Um, Again, a lot of times I do automatic writing for myself, and the script
Mhm.
looks very different between
Oh
all the
wow.
different beings. So immediately I know from the script who it is, as well as a kind of a visual cue for me.
Mhm.
Um, so there's a sense of like, oh, this is new. Hi, who's this?
Mm.
Um, and I think people ask, well, how do you know who to trust?
Yeah, of
It's like
course.
meeting another human being.
Yeah.
We only can know them by who they show themselves to be in that
All
moment or
right.
who they tell us they are, what their history is. It's the same thing interdimensionally. I have to choose whether that vibration is in alignment with me. Is the information that they're giving me in alignment with me? Some of our friends give great advice, some of them not so much.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing interdimensionally. So, we have to get in the driver's seat and decide, is this something that is in alignment with me or not? It's not
Mhm.
giving our power away because they're in another dimension. So sometimes it's kind of checking in to see who they are. I was very lucky early on. I'd probably been channeling for about a year, and I met two other women who were on the same journey, and we all started channeling together, and we got together every night. We're in our mid 20s, and
Yeah.
most mi- people
Don't.
that age are out drinking and
Yeah.
dancing, and we were more interested in channeling. So, um, for almost a year, we got together almost every day,
Wow.
and we just played. And one person would channel, one would ask the question, and the odd man out got a chance to kind of check in and see what they were getting at the same time. And it was probably the fastest way to build confidence and to know that what you were getting was accurate, because everybody
Yeah.
was doing the same thing. But sometimes what would happen at the very beginning is that the energy would shift, and we're like, this does
Yeah.
not feel high. So we weren't able to sustain our resonance, and other beings of lower energy would come in.
Uh,
And, with the three of us, somebody might recognize it first and say, does this feel different? And you're like,
mhm.
yeah, it does. So we'd have to clear, reset. And so we learned how to use discernment and to recognize that frequency as the energy was coming in. This doesn't feel very high.
Right.
So it was a great way for me to learn and to really um, kind of gain mastery over
Yeah.
that through repetition. And
Perfect.
I'm a big fan of channeling in groups because I think we learn pretty quickly that way. Um, you
Yeah.
can learn, like I said, by somebody else being the channel and you kind of checking in to get the information for yourself in that moment. I think that helps us because a lot of times we'll feel like, well, am I just making this up?
Yeah, of
But
course. Especially if
what
you're by yourself.
Yeah, but what you'll find is that your imagination actually feels really flat in
Yeah.
comparison to the information that you get.
Yeah. That's the other thing I was excited to talk to you about, So, you learn kind of how, not necessarily like how this pertains to also with psychics, but one person who's sitting across from you, or a group of people, they almost act as a conduit and and like a grounding for the channel, and so there's a relationship that happens, and I think it's electromagnetic. I think it's obviously energetic, but like I can't remember if it was maybe it was Jane Roberts who used to talk about her husband was like it would have been much more difficult for her to channel if she hadn't been with her husband. He acted like an anchor for this entity to come through because they both had a relationship with him. And like, how do you explain that to people? It's such a fascinating thing. I think, like, it, especially if you're just starting out. Like, I feel like if you're just gonna swim in the pool by yourself, no one's gonna be able to. It's gonna be hard for you to know if you're doing the breaststroke, or what how is it you're getting around the pool. When you're with someone or with people, then you have not only more perspective, but I think you have more of a conduit into that perspective.
Well, I think other people help to hold the space,
Yeah.
definitely. And, it's one thing when we channel for ourselves, because we're invested in the answer.
Yeah.
So sometimes the ego can get a little involved, and, you're kind of in and out at that
Yeah.
point. Um, it's much easier to channel for other people
It is.
when
Yeah.
you're just not invested, and you can just be the conduit for the information. Um, I definitely think it's easier when somebody else is there to hold space to witness,
Yeah.
because you're also oftentimes, if you're by yourself, you're trying to consciously make sense of the information, and you're trying
Yeah.
to go back and forth. So if you're channeling verbally, it might be easier for you to channel into a recorder so that you can go back and listen to it later,
Yeah.
and so that you don't have to remember everything in that moment. And, automatic writing, it's written down for you. So those would be the two things I would recommend, either the automatic writing or recording, to make it easier for yourself when you're channeling.
Yeah, I remember when I first started trying to do it myself, I was like, it's impossible. It's almost impossible to, you know, ask yourself questions, because they have to come from one part of the mind and then switch back into. It was such like a quagmire. Like I was just spinning my wheels. I was like, this isn't going to work. I can't ask myself questions. I mean, I can, but then I'm out of that state, and I'm gonna.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting learning process.
But you
Uh,
get better at it. So the more
yeah,
you channel, the easier it is for you to move back and forth between those spaces.
yeah,
If there's something specifically that you want to know, you can certainly write it all out before you start and just ask your guides to cover it all. Or
yeah,
what's important for you to know. The interesting thing is that when you start to channel, the questions that you have, you get into that space, that heart center space, and you realize they're really non-issues. They're really
yeah.
not important. And people have that experience, especially when I work with the Pleiadians. They've got all these questions, and then the second they go into the heart center space, they're like, I don't have any questions. No, I'm good.
Yeah, there's so much in that statement, about the things we're trying to manifest, and we have all these ideas, but when you finally get aligned and have the true ability to manifest those things, you don't even you're like, wait, I don't even want that. That was on my list. Like erase that. Like I'm not interested in that. How did that?
Yes.
It's so funny how everything changes when you begin to align with your heart. It's like you don't have the same ideas about what you want.
Yeah.
Life kind of rearranges itself
Well, a
for
lot of
you.
times, yeah, the things that we want are fear-based. It's to
Yeah,
avoid a
or
pain point.
egoic, externally validating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very true. So I got a chance to I think when I met you in Sedona, you worked with Rob, and Rob, for everyone who doesn't know Rob, I have an incredible podcast. Maybe two. No, I have either one or two podcasts with Rob Gothia. He's a fantastic human being and an incredible channel, and so having both worked in a session with him and also trained with him. He has this very long process of toning and clearing that he has always traditionally went through in order to clear everything out and be as pure a channel as he can. And it's fascinating to me that you know we it's kind of like we almost started with Edgar Casey, the sleeping prophet, and he would literally be like talking in his sleep, right? And then as consciousness seemed to expand and evolve with humanity, then people would go into a trance, but they weren't completely sleeping like Edgar was known to be sleeping. And now you have very conscious channels who can drop in and or just be in a state that like I am now, and the guides can come through. And you worked with Rob, and he had an amazing channeling that day for us. And he dropped in quick. What do you think is what is that correspond to humanity's rise in consciousness? Like, how would you explain that?
Some of that is a soul contract,
Mm,
and what level of consciousness you want to be in when you bring the information in. And I can't really speak for Rob, but I think he's an amazing channel.
okay.
He's an amazing human being. I'll get to be with him in West Virginia in November for his event.
Nice.
Um, and some of that, I think for him, it depends on who he's channeling now,
Yeah.
whether he goes really deep and has no awareness
Yeah.
or not. For me, my contract was to be present. That was really important to me. So, um, what I did that evening, we were having dinner, a group of us. It was
Yeah.
the night before the event that we were doing. We were doing the Lemurian Life Expo. And they were just like, go work with him. And I was like,
Yeah.
we're sitting here at dinner. Come on, really?
Yeah.
Like, yes, now. And
Wow.
so they told me what they wanted me to do. And so I shared with him some of my energetic records of how I
Mm.
worked to get into that space so quickly. And so, a big part of my work is the language of light.
Yes.
And, I've studied a lot of different healing modalities, or I did at least in the very beginning. And so, we did a little bit of energetic clearing, we did a little bit of language of light activation in a very short amount of time. But a lot of that was just giving in the template, how I
Mm.
do it, the how to manual.
Right.
So, that was fun. That was fun to
Yeah.
see him be able to shift and do that. So,
It was
uh,
awesome to witness.
yeah.
Yeah, really cool. Yeah. Um, that's and you always have a lot of wisdom to share, both personally and through your guides. And it's one of the reasons why I love kind of tuning into you and seeing what you're saying, kind of about what's going on, and taking the temperature of this planet. And but we talked a little bit about prophecy, self-fulfilling prophecy, self-determination. And like I feel like with so many people in their religious orientation, seemingly so hell bent, for either lack of a better word or perfect word, on bringing their religious apocalypse into fruition for whatever they think is going to happen afterwards. Like, you know, and there's a lot of different very powerful people who are working in that regard because they think the end of times spells the beginning of their reign, for whatever their reasons are. And but then people are like, well, that's because it says this in this book, and it's prophecy. I'm like, no, it's because a bunch of you, I won't use any bad words, people believe that, and you're bringing it into creation, and the rest of us are having to deal with it. Like, what do you say about self-fulfilling prophecy, and the prophecies of the religious texts, and like, what do you think is really going on there?
So with a lot of the religious texts, um, the information has been altered and manipulated to control.
Yeah.
So, it's the same story that's been retold again and again and again for a very, very long time. So in some ways, I'll say it just really doesn't matter. It's okay if that's where they want to go.
Yeah.
I think the challenge for us is that we think, well, now I'm going to be stuck on this planet because
Mhm.
you are thinking all of these thoughts about doomsday, and I'm going to be forced to live in this
What?
hellhole because of
Yeah.
it. So that's kind of where we started, is knowing that that may be the collective frequency. I guess I should probably back up. So the guides are very specific about the imagery that they use for time. So if you can imagine a giant sphere, and every now moment is another small sphere on the surface of the big one. And you move from moment to moment to moment to moment, and you string them together, and you give yourself the illusion of a timeline.
Hmm.
So every singular now moment is built upon a collective frequency. So you can think of a triangle and the circles on the top. The collective frequency, they're the stories of what the collective says happened. And there's stories because they may not be how things really unfolded. It's just the way that we perceive it. They always say the story goes to the victor. So
Hmm.
the frequency of the collective, and then your own personal stories. You say, well, this happened when I was 10, this happened when I was 15. Whatever we're dragging around, that's the foundation for the now moment, and that we're then perceiving things from. So we can move from one now moment to any now moment on the surface of that sphere. We have the ability to, but most of the time we're moving to a dot that is right next to it because the frequency is very similar. Every moment we alter our frequency by virtue of having had the previous moment's experience. What we often will term a miracle is when we go to a now moment that is on the other side of the sphere, that has a vastly different frequency than the one that we were previously standing on. We've
Right.
radically altered our perception of something. And when we do that, our entire energetic template, which creates the physical body, changes. And so the physical body also can radically alter. So this is when
Yeah.
people immediately go into remission from
Right.
illnesses. People have near-death experiences. They radically alter their perception of reality. They come back, their energy changes. It's
Everything.
because
Yeah.
they've gone to something that's vastly different. So we are always going to the now moment where we're going to be able to be of the greatest service and to have the greatest soul growth. Those are not independent of each other. We will always have both of those things. So in order for us to be the greatest service, it might be that we are on a now moment where the collective consciousness is very chaotic. We might need to be that light in the midst of the chaos. It doesn't mean that we have to be struggling in that. We can feel happy and expanded and uplifted, and we can see joy in the world.
Yeah.
There are so many good things that happen in the world, but we just don't hear about it. We're constantly being
Yeah.
fed this diet of negativity. This is what's wrong with you. This is what's happening here. And it doesn't matter whether it's mainstream news or alternative news,
No.
it's always negatively slanted. So when we are aligning with that, then that's what we're going to perceive in the world because those are our filters.
Yeah.
So when we can go back to this heart centered space doesn't have any filters. It
No.
is in connection with divine source energy, and you're allowing the full force of source to run through you. At that point, it doesn't really matter to you which version of the now moment you're standing on. You can still manifest and create what you want, and you can perceive all of those higher and good things happening. So I think when we talk about, the religious zealots and people who want to create all of these unfortunate things in the world,
Yeah.
we don't have to suffer because of it. And it's
Yeah.
really important to be that frequency that you want the world to become,
Yeah.
be the change that you want to
Let's
see.
see. Yeah.
So, and that's literally it. As you change your frequency, then you can see that in the world.
Yeah.
But it's always an inside job. And if you are feeling trapped or stuck, then you're putting your power outside of you. You
Yeah.
are allowing the external condition to drive your internal state. And manifestation does not work that way. It starts first on the inside, it gets reflected back to you on the outside in, and reinforces the original vibration that you're pulsing out.
Yeah.
So if that is you, if you're somebody who is worried and stressed about all that, what is going on outside of you, you've got to clean up the inside.
Yeah.
You've got to
It's
start there and stop giving the power to whatever narrative is being told is happening in the world. Because a lot of times, you know, these things have been going on
yeah.
forever, but news hasn't spread in the way that it is today, and
That's
it's just reinforcing that again and again and again, and that does become your reality.
it's true, and that, that goes for not just people who are looking at maybe what's happening in Gaza and Ukraine and the Congo and but also what's happening with Mrs. Jones, what's happening with your bills, what's happening with the chaos that seems to be your daily life. It's like if everything is a cause of strain and stress and worry, then you have to look within because that is also a reflection of what's going on with you. And the more
Yeah.
coherent you get in heart and mind, the more those things are going to become much easier to discern and work out in a way that is, allows for ease and joy. And I tell people all the time, like, this is the only game in town, man. It's the, find what you love and do it, but what are you doing to expand your heart and your consciousness? Like, what else would you want to be doing? If you're just out in this material world and the way that they teach us it is, how you think you're going to die happy? You know what I mean? Like, these people are lost, in many ways, but they're finding their way. More than ever, I think people are really starting to see the truth of the matrix, and demanding something different, and demanding that things change. And I love what you said about we're past the tipping point.
Yeah.
I feel
And
that we are
demanding it of
too. It's just
themselves
easy to
too.
forget. Yeah, yeah, Let's say that again. Say that again.
and demanding that of themselves,
Yeah.
you know, deciding that they want to be another way. They don't
Hmm.
want to stay in that heaviness, in that muck, and they're seeking,
Yeah.
interestingly enough, ancient tools to help things that
Yeah.
we've had on this planet for thousands and thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah. Instead of asking ChatGPT, ChatGPT, why am I so this? It's crazy. It's crazy. People use that thing for, and then they published it. They just announced that they will be having an erotic section of ChatGPT. I'm like, oh, just great. Who didn't see this coming? You know what I mean? Just what people need. My God, the world is so funny and confused, but it's an amazing time to be alive. That's for sure.
I'm not
You
even
know,
sure how that works.
I'm not sure how it
How
works
that
either.
section works.
I mean, I know you're probably gonna have to pay extra for it. That's the only thing I am sure of. It's gonna cost. But I'm like I mentioned, I'm in Mexico City right now, and I was wondering, have you heard about the Bugosphere, about the that beautiful little sphere that crash landed in Colombia and then was brought to Mexico to be studied by and some people who
Yes.
have working. What I have to ask because I'm literally going to see it. What have the guides like said, or what have you perceived about the Bugosphere?
They said it is a piece of ET tech that malfunctioned.
Mm.
They're like, it was a oops.
Yeah,
That wasn't supposed to happen. So, yeah, they say it's a piece of ET tech.
it's so obvious. You know what I mean? Like, and it hit a power line and then kind of it became inert. It didn't free fall. It just kind of slowly went down, and then over the course of time, they were able to study and watch as it kind of powered down, and lost that incredible energy that it had when they first found it. But it's still humming. I put my hand on it last night, and you can feel the energy coming off it. There's still so much potential in there. I just think it has a default mode that kicks off once it hits a certain altitude where the humans could get in trouble with it, and it just goes, it has an off switch. So, but it's really cool. It's really awesome to touch. And then last night, I also saw the Nazca. They call them mummies. I don't know why they call them mummies. Maybe because they're so desiccated, they almost look like they were mummified. Have you heard or seen? They were that happened a little while. They're older than the Bugosphere. They were found by the Nazca lines, and I don't know. They're so obviously little ETs. People are just they did a good job creating a scandal and slandering this when this came out. They made like replica dolls of these things and said, "Oh, these are them," and they went about discrediting them. But I was wondering, have you heard about the Nazca mummies?
I haven't. That's one I haven't heard
No.
of yet.
Okay, yeah, I had to ask about that,
Very
but
interesting.
yeah, I saw them last night. I was, I didn't want to touch them because they're really desiccating. But they have little. You can see their fingernails. You could see the skeletal, the ligature, in what's left of them. It's all so obviously not fake, and it's like mind blowing that we live in a world where, like, I have to go to an undisclosed location somewhere in Mexico to see what the world won't accept yet, or what they've been convinced is not real. But
Well,
I mean,
and that all goes to power,
yeah,
because again, when the ET information starts coming out, it radically changes our perception. And the first question is about energy, and our entire
yeah,
economic system is built on energy. So it radically alters the power and who holds power.
big,
That's why it's
yeah,
been suppressed.
big threat. I mean, what would we have to go to war over if there was no
Yeah,
energy crisis? You know,
yeah.
but Wendy, what would you leave our my incredible listeners with? What words of wisdom would you have for them in this time we're living in before we part ways?
I think probably with the message from the P's, the message they really want to convey is that we are so much more powerful than we think we are. Trust in yourself and know that you have the ability to create whatever it is that you want as you align with the frequency. And also, the other thing is pay attention to whatever is showing up in your life in this moment, because whatever is showing up in your life in this moment is the most important thing for you to deal with.
Wow.
So, if you want something that's of a high vibrational nature, the way to get it is to deal with what's here.
Right here, right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love it. Wendy, thank you so much. Tell everyone where they can follow you, find you, subscribe to you, and stay up to date with your transmissions and teachings.
Yes, so you can find me over on our website at higherfrequencies.net. And then you can also find us over on the socials. It's always HGR Frequencies, plural. And then in November, the 14th through the 16th, as I mentioned, I'll be in West Virginia with Rob Gothier for the channel panel and a bunch of other amazing channels. And then I'll be back out in LA for the Conscious Life Expo in February.
I'll be there. I'll be there. So I'll see you again there, I'm sure.
Excellent.
But so thank you so much for your time. For everyone who's listening, I like I mentioned, I'm not in my studio where I typically record, so thanks for bearing with me. I hope the sound and audio is up to par. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on Spotify, iTunes. If you enjoy this podcast, we grow and thrive on reviews, and we appreciate them whenever we can get them. So please don't forget, if you have a moment, to drop us one. And Wendy, thank you again. I appreciate your time so much.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it.
You take care. I'm sure I'll see you at some point.
It'd be great.
Yes. Thank you so much. Take care.